What's up, everybody? Coach Jeremiah here from Case Specific Athletics at the Case Specific Wellness Center. You can't see wellness, but it's down here. Thank you guys for tuning into this video this week. I wanted to do a hip series where we kind of address different training tactics and methodologies for getting our hips and our lower body to work right. Basically for lifting, running, sport, whatever it is. I think a lot of people tend to have issues that are a result of restricted hips or other injuries related to the hips. And this is just going to be a 3-part video series to kind of address those problems and hopefully get you guys feeling and moving better. This all came apart or came to be first as a result of just something that I wanted to do just for a video to put out there. But I've also recently noticed that I have some hip restrictions of my own that I believe are leading to some back pain and some injuries that I've been having lately that I don't feel like I should be having. The way I train, I didn't really see a reason that I would be having I injured my back a couple months ago squatting, and I'm still having, oh my gosh, I injured my back in college lifting, and I've re-injured it a couple of times since then. It's been a while though, but it's just constant tension and pain in my low back. And I'm starting to get the feeling that it's related to my own hip restrictions that I have. And so this became not only a video for me to hopefully help you guys, but actually help myself a little bit as we go along with it. So today's video is going to focus on mobilizing the hips. Our hips have a lot of different motions that they can go through as they are a ball and socket joint, meaning that our femur, which is a big long bone in our leg that goes right through here, has a head on it like this, and in your pelvis, your hip joint here, that sits in a joint like this, where it is allowed to move in all kinds of different directions, internal, external rotation, out to the side, forward, back, all over the place. There's a lot of movement through those areas. With that, there's a lot of potential restriction that we can have through those areas. So in this video today, we're gonna address internal and external rotation. We're gonna address hip flexion, or bringing our knees up like that. And we're going to address hip abduction, which is bringing our legs apart. That's an area that I particularly have a lot of restriction in. So I'm going to show you guys 4 different exercises to kind of start loosening up those hips. I'll give some training recommendations on how often I think you should do them, or the scheme to set it up to do it. And then next week again, we'll look at kind of waking up the muscles surrounding those joints. And following that, some fundamental movement patterns and how I like to coach them for training the muscles that surround those joints so that we can avoid these issues later. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope you guys come back for the next 2 weeks. Welcome to the Case Specific Athletics Hip Care Series. So there's 4 main movements that we're going to address with this mobility video. Those are going to be internal and external rotation, hip flexion, as well as hip adduction. So we're going to stretch out the muscle groups that kind of perform those tasks. The first one I'm going to show you guys is an internal rotator stretch. This one's a little bit more complicated. I swear they'll get easier after this one, but we'll just knock it out at the beginning, and hope that you guys can get the idea here. What we're going to do is I'm going to use a bench for this, and I'm going to put my shin across that bench so that my foot is hanging down on one side and my knee is on the other. So I'm going to move my pad here for the other ones that are coming here. Knee, I'm going to put on the left side of the bench. My foot, my toe, hopefully you guys can see behind me, is rotated out and set down the other side of the bench. I'm dropping my toes down over the edge because I want to be able to pull against that bench with my foot and have it not move. This is going to be that stretch for the internal rotators. So right now, I'm squared up with the direction of the bench. My foot is slightly internally rotated, or my leg rather, is slightly internally rotated with my foot on the opposite side of the bench. What I'm going to do is first kind of rotate my hips to my right. This is my right foot's up on the bench, and I'll feel the tension kind of build right in my groin here, right in the front side, internal part of my hip. And now I'm going to push my hips back into a hinge. So I'm driving my hips back, and what I'm doing here is forcing my foot into some internal rotation that's being resisted against. So I'm hinging the hips back, I'm gonna hold this position. Again, I'm twisting this way slightly, but keeping my body all square through my hips. And just sitting in that position, we're gonna say about 5 seconds. And then I'm gonna relax out of the hinge and out of that rotation. So again, I'm gonna rotate my hips to the right, and then hinge back. Feel that deep stretch on the inside of my leg. Hold for about 5 seconds. Rotate out. We're gonna do that 5 to 10 times. And again, that's kind of stretching these internal rotators right here on the inside of our hips, right near our groin. We'll do the same thing on the other side. We'll give you guys a slightly different perspective here. So left foot, the left knee on the right side of the bench, left foot hanging down the left side. Square it up. I'm gonna rotate now to my left and then hinge my hips back. And I can feel this side's even a little bit tighter, probably more or less because I practiced trying to do that stretch for you 15 times before starting the video. But either way, rotating to the left, hinge the hips back, stretching out the groin, those internal rotators right there. Hold for about 5 seconds. Relax out of the hinge and out of the rotation. Rotate in, kick the hips back, hold that position about 5 seconds. All the while we're doing some nice, slow, deep breathing here and relaxing back up out of it. I would say do 5 to 10 reps on each side, just as a starting point. Again, you're gonna feel a very deep stretch in through here. So that is our internal rotator stretch. The next one we're gonna look at is an external rotator stretch or a piriformis stretch. And this is a very basic one. Like I said, it gets a lot easier after this. So we're just gonna take a seat on our bench. You may need to use a higher seat for this. The lower you get in the seated position, the more challenging this stretch becomes. So start yourself higher if needed. And there's other variations for this, but again, for this video, just to keep it simple, I'm gonna show you the one that I would basically use. I'm gonna throw one foot up across the opposite knee. I'm gonna make sure this shin is vertical. It's real easy to kind of let it lean one way or the other or not have your foot up tall enough. So I'm gonna put it straight up and down. I'm just gonna grab the outside of my foot with my right hand. So this is my left foot, grabbing my right hand, and left elbow. It's not gonna drive that knee down towards the floor. It's just gonna hold a little bit of tension there. This might immediately give you a very deep stretch on the outside of this hip. If that's the case, that's fine. Hold that position, breathe nice and deep through it. For some of you, if you're not as restricted here, what we're gonna do, take a big deep breath in, and then we're gonna hinge. We're gonna try to hinge by driving our hips back, but keeping our upper back and our spine nice and neutral, and we're just gonna lean into that a little bit. I say that because I don't want you guys rounding over it like this. I wanna keep up nice and tall as best I can. We're gonna hold that position right there. Let's say 30 to 60 seconds. It's gonna be a very intense stretch, I think, for a lot of you. It is for me. And we're just holding that, breathing nice and slowly through it. Again, we're getting a very deep stretch. Fall off the bench here. Right on the outside of this hip that we have crossed over. Hold it, breathe deep. Each time you exhale nice and slowly, we maybe try to lean into it a little bit more. Repeat that process, nice and slow. I would say hold that for around 30 to 60 seconds on each side. You can also do shorter intervals and go back and forth. That's a technique that I like to use a little bit more. This is my really tight leg, so might as well get my own stretching in on the video. Again, you can see this knee just immediately hangs up a little bit higher. So I'm gonna add some pressure with that elbow, keep the back up nice and straight, but I'm gonna hinge my hips back and just kind of push my chest forward towards my foot a little bit. And boy, is that painful. I hope you guys aren't as restricted as me, but this is a very common issue, I think. A lot of people have piriformis syndrome where they end up with pain all the way down their leg from this and drive them crazy. So this is how we address it. We just stretch the hell out of that thing. So I'm holding that position, I'm breathing deep. Breathing out, I'm gonna lean into it a little bit deeper. That's painful. Like I mentioned in the intro, this is something that I particularly need to work on because of the pressure and the pain that it has put on my back, or as it seems, it's put on my back for a long time now. And I notice whenever I stretch all this stuff out, that pain tends to ease up a little bit. I can feel like I have more movement through my low back and my hips. So again, back and forth maybe 4 or 5 times, or if you want to just hold for 30, 60 seconds on one, do the same on the other. We've now addressed our internal and external rotators. Rotators, not rotators. We're going to switch into our hip flexors. I did a video recently where I mentioned how annoyed I am that I am still giving people this hip flexor stretch, but it's a really good stretch, so I can't be that mad about it. So, hip flexors go from the back of your spine over to the fronts of your thighs. They bring your knees up like this. When we spend a lot of time in a sitting position at our desk or at work, at school, whatever, those muscles become shortened, a little bit weakened, and they just develop a new length that likes being in this position more. What that leads to is that it pulls on the fronts of our hips, makes our butt stick out. Just doing that, I can feel the tension in my low back. We're basically taking our vertebrae at that point, our low back, and just crunching them together like this. It causes a lot of tension, a lot of trauma over time, leads to a lot of serious issues if not addressed properly. So what we want to do, we want to take these muscles that are going in the front of our leg and making us walk like an old person or an Instagram girl. We want to loosen those up and allow the fronts of our hips to come up and the backs of our hips to come down. Ease that tension here through our low back. Introducing the couch stretch or a hip flexor stretch. Looking like a Bulgarian split squat here, we're gonna put one foot up on a bench or a couch or a chair or something similar, and we're gonna drop a knee straight down to the floor, right below that surface that we have our foot on. And all we're gonna do here is drive our hips forward, or drive our hip forward rather. So my right foot's up on the bench. I'm gonna push this right hip down towards the floor here and lean into that a little bit, and you're gonna feel a deep, deep stretch down to the front of your leg. The more you squeeze your butt on that side and drive it towards the floor, I think the higher you generally feel it, so you'll feel it more up through here. But some of us will feel that tension down here. That's because that muscle stretches the whole way down that femur. So it's okay if you feel it down low. We're stretching your quad out, yes, but we are getting these muscles to cross over that joint a little bit of tension and stretching. Again, 30 seconds a minute. Switch to the other side, do the same thing. This time the left foot's going up on the bench. I'm bringing that knee down as close to the base of the bench as I can. Right foot's out in front of me to give me a wide base of support, and I'm driving the hips down towards the floor in that position. So something that can also be done once you start to get pretty good with the stretch, I still feel a stretch here, but it's not as intense as it used to be. What you can do is actually put your foot flat against a wall instead of on the bench. So in this position here, see if I can show you guys in the video, my foot is allowed to relax in this partially dorsiflex position where my ankle moves like that. If we put it flat against a wall, that pulls everything out really intensely, and even just doing that right there is still a really, really deep stretch. I'm driving my hip towards the floor, I'm squeezing my left butt cheek, and I'm getting an awesome quad stretch right there. So that's another way that you guys can do this. It's a little bit more active and a little bit more intense. 30, 60 seconds each side. Do that stretch every single day. If you have low back pain or hip pain, in my opinion, you can't do it enough because we all do spend so much time sitting like this. It's a really good thing to address and to keep taking care of. The last stretch that we're gonna put in this video is what we call a tactical frog. This is a stretch that looks a little suggestive. We're gonna get past that though, because we're adults and we wanna have happy, healthy hips. So what we are going to do here is stretch out the adductors or our groin muscles that pull our legs in together. This is something that I have found recently in particular, that I have very limited mobility and a lot of weakness in those muscles. I think because I spent so many years squatting with a narrow stance and deadlifting with a narrow stance, I never put my legs out wide and activated those adductors to their full potential. And so recently I've started to train a lot more with a sumo stance, very wide, really activating these muscles, and it is wreaking havoc on my hips and my everything in my lower body. So I've had to put a little bit more time into taking care of that and addressing these weaknesses and these restrictions in my mobility. So with all that being said, a tactical frog, we're going into a hands and knee position. I'm gonna now take my knees out as wide as I can, without hurting myself, of course. And now I'm gonna drop down to my elbows here. Now to get into a deep stretch, for some this might be a pretty tight stretch as it is, but to deepen that, we're going to push our hips straight back. If you have a lot of restriction like me, what you're gonna notice is you get to a point where your butt wants to round under like this. The tactical part of this frog stretch is that we're going to keep our butt up in the air. This is where it gets suggestive. And we're going to drive our hips straight back, only to the point where we can resist that from happening. So right now I'm kind of kicking my hips up towards the ceiling. I'm driving back and I'm sitting in this position and just breathing deep like we've discussed in the last couple. Again, making sure my toes are pointed straight out to the side, really stretching out those internal rotators here. So we're forcing our feet into external rotation. Holding that position for 5-10 seconds, relaxing out of it just a little bit. Now you might notice as soon as you ease up out of that, you're gonna say, wow, I feel some of that restriction already gone. Good, let's keep it feeling terrible. And let's widen our knees up a little bit. Sit right back into it. I did these for about 20 minutes yesterday, and I can already feel today that they are improved from where they were. I'm sitting in there for about 5-10 seconds, breathing deep, relaxing up out of it. You're gonna feel so much relief whenever you rock forward out of that position, it's amazing. Sit back in. Again, I'm making sure my hips don't round underneath. I'm pushing my butt up towards the ceiling. Keeps you active on your hips a little bit and allows you to kind of beat that tendency of the body to resist the stretching. Hold for a few seconds, relax up out of it. Now, usually I get to a point like this where coming up out of that position is painful and challenging, so just make sure you take that slowly and don't overstrain yourself coming up out of that. That is your tactical frog stretch. Those are 4 hip mobility drills to help us get on the right track to moving and feeling better through our lower body. Tune in next week for some activation drills. Now that we've loosened everything up, we're going to wake everything up and kind of get it primed and ready to actually exercise 2 weeks from now when we do actual training video. So, I'm Coach Jeremiah with Case Specific Athletics and Case Specific Wellness. There it is. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.